Hi, this is Jennifer Toronto with She Shall Be Praised, a podcast about supporting and uplifting women and sharing experiences so that we can learn from each other. Right now, it's mostly me sharing experiences. Sometimes I wish I had a second voice here. I do. And so hopefully soon I'll make that happen. It's funny, today is part three of uh, finding peace in the midst of a storm. And there's a great irony in life, right? That sometimes when you write about a thing, then you get to experience it. And when I originally wrote this back in 2008, my life was very difficult. I had four young sons. We were running a business. Income was unpredictable. Katrina had happened. Everybody moved away. Life was hard. Um, but you're never insulated from difficulties in life, you know. Um, when I was young, I thought if I had more money, then, life would be better. And that's not always the case, right? Because life hits you with other things as well. So today, I'm going to go ahead. I will read the third installment, the final installment of Peace in the Midst of a Storm, and then I'll talk a little bit about what what's happened now, what happened then, and just living this out because 2008, now that was 17 years ago. So I've had 17 years since I've found this. Really, I should have found it again quite a few times since then. Um, I should be reading my own stuff, but I'll update on that as well. So part one talked about what the word peace really means. Part two explored the purpose and function of storms in our life. Um, why difficulties actually serves a good function, the silver lining, so to speak. And then part four examines the Bible for insight into how to find that peace. Um, this is about what we can do about it. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Now we get to the heart of the matter. I didn't go searching for a way to have peace in a storm. I just knew I needed peace and didn't have it. God took the initiative and taught me about peace with a surprising passage. The story is told in the books of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Each recounting of the events contains slightly different details, and when the different details are combined, a richer picture comes into focus. For this reason, I'm presenting you with the combined stories of Matthew 8:23 through 27, Mark 4:35 through 31, and Luke 8:22 through 25. One day, when evening had come, Jesus told his disciples, "Let's cross over to the other side of the lake." As he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. So they left the crowd and took him along since he was in the boat, and the other boats were with him. As they were sailing, he fell asleep. Suddenly, a violent storm arose and came down on the sea, and the waves were breaking over the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped and they were in danger. But he was in the stern, sleeping on the cushion. So the disciples came and woke him up, saying, "Lord, save us. We're going to die. Master, Master, we're going to die. And Teacher, don't you care we're going to die?" But he said to them, "Why are you fearful, you of little faith?" Then he got up and rebuked the wind and the raging waves and said to the sea, "Silence, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. Then he said to them, "Why are you fearful? Do you still have no faith?" And they were terrified and amazed, saying to one another, "Who can this be? He commands even the wind and the waves, and they obey him." As they set sail, Jesus fell asleep in the stern, the pilot's place no less, and didn't wake up until his disciples came to wake him. Now, that doesn't really seem so odd, and you might be tempted to gloss over the fact that he was sleeping through the storm, but let's take a good look at it. The Gospels tell us that the waves were breaking over the boat was being swamped, and they were in danger. Undoubtedly, the boat was being tossed about. I can just picture his body being jerked back and forth with the tossing of the boat. Since the waves were breaking over the boat, anyone who has spent some time on the water will recognize that this means there was spray coming from the waves. The Gospels also say that the boat was being swamped. The original Greek word here means covered. Most likely he was getting soaked and jerked around, yet he slept. What kind of sleep was this? Now, here I'm going to insert a little commentary. Um, I don't really know how that boat was constructed, right? It's possible he wasn't getting soaked, but most likely he was, unless it was completely closed in. But, a little fishing skiff on the water. I don't know. I mean, there were a few disciples in there, so it wasn't a small boat necessarily, but fishing boats aren't necessarily big. And um, and so the question of whether or not it was covered, I think there's a fair chance that he was getting wet, at least with light spray, but it puts a different spin. Like this sleep, he certainly was getting jerked around. If the waves were coming over the boat and into the boat, that boat was rocking, that boat was moving. So he was certainly getting jerked around, but he might even have been getting wet. And so his sleep was unusual here. And maybe he was exhausted. He was likely exhausted, but I just wanted to, paint that picture. So back to the reading. For the sake of argument, I'll call this intentional sleeping. For this moment, Jesus needed to be unavailable. His body was a human body and got tired in the same way ours does. Surely he physically needed the rest. But in this instance, his rest served an additional purpose. Isaiah 45, verse 15 tells us, yes, you are a God who hides himself, God of Israel, Savior. And in a sense, this is what Jesus did. He hid himself during the storm. But in case you're concerned that God really is sleeping and unaware during your trial, Psalm 121, verses 3 through 4 assures us that your protector will not slumber. Indeed, the protector of Israel does not slumber or sleep. That leads us to point number 1. If Jesus is in the boat, you have nothing to fear. But the disciples did fear. These men were used to fishing on this sea, yet they were very afraid. What was scaring them? I think that question is best answered by looking at Jesus' response. Then he got up and rebuked the wind and the raging waves, and said to the sea, silence, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. Jesus' emphasis here is on being quiet with the words he used. In Greek and Hebrew, just like in English, some words have multiple meanings. The word for wind is strongly associated with spirit or mind. They are often the same word. The word for still means to muzzle, and the word for ceased means to grow weary or tired, to cease from violence or to cease raging. I'm going to do a little illustration to show the double meaning or double entendre. Wind equals spirit mind, still equals muzzle, and cease equals cease from violence, cease raging, grow weary, tired. Without being tedious, I'd like to suggest what he might say for each of us today based upon that passage. Then he got up and rebuked the spirits and minds and said to the voices, stop speaking, be muzzled. And the minds and spirits grew weary and ceased raging from violence. This possibility leads us to point number 2. Since there is no real danger, because Jesus is in the boat, it's the noise of the storm that is scaring you. I don't think I did a very good job in writing this of making my point here. So when he gets up and rebukes the spirits and minds and says to the voices, stop speaking, be muzzled, like this alternative reading, it could be read as he's saying, is he speaking to his disciples, right? Right? So stop, be quiet, be still, cease raging. That was kind of the point that I was making, and not just to his disciples, obviously, because it had a physical effect in the world. But but what I'm saying is there's a dual situation happening here where Jesus is basically saying, be still, be quiet. And he's saying it to all involved. And there's an actual physical effect on that, but there's also a spiritual effect. So when we're in a situation, if Jesus is with us, he can protect us. He will protect us. And so we don't have to fear whatever's going on around it. And I think that's what he was illustrating here. A, by sleeping in the boat, and then B, by using it as an example to say, everything's okay. You can see all this happening around you, but it's okay. There are 3 points to this message, and I've already shared the first two. The third point is the last ditch effort. If you can't find peace with the realization that one, there is nothing to fear, and two, the noise of the storm is what's frightening you, then point number three is to do what the disciples did, cry out to Jesus. Each of the recorded disciples cried out their own plea. And what did he say? He said, "Why are you fearful, you of little faith?" Here he points out that they had no real reason to fear. He could have gone back to sleep, but he didn't. Let me say that again. He could have gone back to sleep, but he didn't. Because he loved them and to demonstrate his power, he honored their pleas. He will also honor ours. He took action to comfort his disciples. James 1:6 says, "But let him ask in faith without doubting, for the doubter is like the surging sea, driven and tossed by the wind." And isn't that how we are sometimes? Driven and tossed by the wind. But God honors our requests for peace because he loves us. Listen to what God says to us in Jeremiah 29:11. "For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, says the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope." King David understood God's love for us well, and he wrote about it in Psalm 56, verses 8 through 9. "You yourself have recorded my wanderings, put my tears in your bottle. Are they not in your records? Then my enemies will retreat on the day when I call. This I know, God is for me." Indeed, God is for his children. And don't reduce your enemies only to physical human opponents. We have more enemies than that. Let us close with a quick recap. When life is hard and you feel helpless in the midst of a fierce storm, remember these three things. One, if Jesus is with you, no matter what happens around you, you are safe. Two, you're safe, so don't let the sights and sounds of the storm scare you. And three, if you cannot conquer your fear, then cry out to Jesus. But there is one disclaimer. This is only true if Jesus is with you, and Jesus is not with you unless you are with him. But be comforted, because God says in Jeremiah 29, verses 12 through 13, "You will call to me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart." May you find in him the peace that passes all understanding, and may his joy be in you and your joy be complete. So I read through this. I did some editing. I probably could do a little more editing if we're going to be honest. I did some editing, reading it out. But it's funny because I've been working on this 3-part piece blog and podcast for the last 3 weeks or so, maybe 4. And I entered a little bit of a storm myself, and there's two storms, if you want to call them that. Um, One was just business. I'm a business owner, and sometimes that's hard. Anyone who's been a business owner knows it is just sometimes hard, and amazingly so. And even when you do well, that doesn't stop it from being hard. There are just ups and downs, and that's just a part of life, of the life of a business owner anyway. And so I have been working very hard for almost a year now, very intentionally hard, and and I have not seen the results that I was working for. Now I still think they're coming, but but sometimes, I think very often that being A business owner is a lot like being a farmer in many ways. You sow your seed, you plant, and then you have to wait. And the harvest will come in when it's ready and not a moment before. But it's in the waiting that can be really hard, right? And so, when the locusts come, all your hard work can be for nothing. You can just see it go right out the window. And I'm not saying locusts have come. I'm just saying the harvest isn't ready yet. And I'm not the most patient person. So there's been that. So I've been dealing with that. And then the other thing is that my son has had a little bit of a health scare. And we have been a little worried about him for some time now. Um, and it kind of came to a head this past week. He got sick, and we took him to the doctor, which he had been unwilling to go before. And we got a call on Friday that the doctor wanted to do more testing, but didn't get information about it because he didn't answer the phone. He was out, and then he actually got a call this morning on a Sunday, no less. The doctor called him, and told him what was going on, and it it doesn't look like anything terribly. Actually, I'll just say it doesn't. It's not a big. This part's not a big deal. But anemia runs in my mom's been anemic. I tend to run anemic, and it looks like he's running anemic too. Now, I don't know if there's anything else going on, but from I've been, concerned for a couple of years, and then to hear that the doctor wanted to do more testing, but to not have a clue what the testing was. Um, this morning it just kind of had me torn up. Last night I was upset about it, and because you fear what possibly could it be, what could be wrong, and you don't know, and so you just have to wait and find out. And so um, it was a real blessing to hear today that at least at this point, that's it. Because that is not life threatening necessarily. I mean, it could be, I guess, but it's not life threat. It's easily treatable, and you know, but it's funny because I feel like, I've been talking about having peace, and then I got tested on it. And that's the great irony of life is you have to walk your talk, right? You have to walk your talk. I um I made a meme this past week, and it said basically how you react in any situation shows where your confidence lies. And so our reaction shows us what we really believe to serious issues, shows us what we really believe. And I had fear. And it's funny because intellectually I could know that most issues work themselves out. Most things work themselves out. And even now, with modern medicine, most issues are highly treatable. But knowing that in my head did not convince my heart not to have fear, not to be fearful, not to worry. And I found even within myself, that reluctance to pray. And it's like, where does it come from? You know, like, why am I reluctant to do that? I mean, I say it not really knowing. I mean, let me say it a different way. I say it not lacking a knowledge of where it comes from. That's just part of the rebelliousness of my nature. Um, is that I resist sometimes the very thing, and it's, I guess, the rebel, that's the sin nature, right? Like, we resist doing the things that we know we need to do, and so we stay with the consequences rather than turning to the one who can give us peace. But I thought about it, you know, there was a verse, maybe the least likely verse in the entire thing. that kept coming back to my mind. And that verse was found, it's somewhere right in the middle, but your protector neither slumbers nor your protector. That's it. Your protector. We talk about many of God's names. Jehovah Jireh, the provider, God the provider, you know. Um, we talk about the Prince of Peace. We talk about many of the names, but your protector. That was the one that kept coming to me over the last few days. And so I shared this. I shared the blog and I'm making this podcast because I want to get what I found out. I want other people to know as well. I want other people to have a place to turn, just like I have a place to turn. But I needed to turn to that place. And I needed it too. And sometimes it begs the question, right? Like, have I been studying this? Have I been working on this to help others? Or was I working on this because I was going to need it? So that's Peace in the Midst of a Storm, part 3 in a nutshell. I would love feedback. I'd love to hear from you. I really want this to be a dialogue. I'm looking to create community. When I was young, I used to feel like I had to learn everything on my own. I had to learn the hard way. And I realized I had a friend who actually taught me. She taught me by her actions. She was a good bit younger than me, and she wanted to learn from other people so she didn't have to stumble and make a whole bunch of mistakes. And I'm like, wow, that's so smart. Like, imagine that, learning from other people. So you don't have to stumble through life making a mess of everything you touch. Wow, what a thought. And I looked at her, and she was coming to me for wisdom and advice. And she touched me and taught me so much. And I just looked at her and I'm like, I want to be like you. I don't I don't think I ever told that to her, which is really a shame. I have to maybe one day get back in touch. But it's true. I decided from our friendship that I wanted to be like her. I wanted to be teachable. I wanted to be coachable. And I didn't want to have to do everything the hard way because sometimes the hard way leaves lasting consequences. And, most things are a bump in the road, but some things you live with for the rest of your life. And if you can't learn from other people, you're going to create more of those. So, there's a part of me that's been a teacher for as long as I can remember. I tutored friends in high school. So that's a big part of why I put this out there. But it's also because I firmly believe that we shouldn't have to stumble through life doing things the hard way, and that a huge part of our own growth, both spiritual and emotional and mental, psychological growth, even professional, should be learning from others who have walked before us and not having to stumble through everything ourselves. It's a hard lesson to learn, I know. I have a hard head, and that's had to be softened quite a few times in a very unpleasant way. But that's why I'm doing this. So if there's something that you would like to know about some particular topic, I would love to hear it. I've been thinking a lot about the Proverbs 31 woman. That's what this is based on. You know, she was just a monster to me when I was younger because I'm like, who can do this? This is not even possible. She wakes up before everyone. She goes to sleep after everyone. Who can do this? Like, no one has that energy. So she was just a monster to me. Um, I don't feel that way anymore when I think about it. Of course, I really need to dig into it, but and that's partly because I am no longer a young mother, you know. Um, and so my time is different now. And so I see some of the things differently. And so I'll be writing on that. But if there's something else that writing and speaking. But if there's something else that you would like for me to cover, let me know. Drop me a line, send me a message, visit my website, shoot me an email, something, and let me know. And I would love to have a dialogue and, talk about what you want to hear about. So have a great week, and I look forward to doing another one next week. It will not be on peace. It will probably be on whatever future trial is coming into my life, but I look forward to it because this is the stuff that makes life worth living, right? So have a great week, and I will be back next week.